White House doesn't get to choose that. The law requires you to process people who are showing up at the border and who claim asylum. Why? Because our asylum law is a bipartisan commitment, an effort to correct for our nation's unconscionable decision to deny entry to Jews to this country who were being hunted and killed by the Nazis. Our nation, Republicans and Democrats, decided, wrote it into law, that we would not repeat that horror ever again, and thus we would allow for people who were fleeing terror and torture to come here, arrive at the border, and make a case for asylum.
What if I told you that a U.S. Senator just accused the Department of Homeland Security of breaking the law, defying Congress, and endangering Americans, all in one hearing? Senator Chris Murphy didn't just ask tough questions, he sounded the alarm about how far this administration is willing to go, even comparing its actions to those of authoritarian regimes. Let's break down what he said and why it should matter to every single American, no matter where you stand on immigration.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here. I'm sorry that I missed your call yesterday. I look forward to working closely with you. I say this with seriousness and respect, but your department is out of control. You are spending like you don't have a budget. You're on the verge of running out of money for the fiscal year. You are illegally refusing to spend funds that have been authorized by this Congress and appropriated by this committee. You are ignoring the immigration laws of this nation, implementing a brand new immigration system that you have invented that has little relation to the statutes that you are required, that you are commanded to follow, as spelled out in your oath of office. You are routinely violating the rights of immigrants who may not be citizens, but whether you like it or not, they have constitutional and statutory rights when they reside in the United States. Your agency acts as if laws don't matter, as if the election gave you some mandate to violate the Constitution and the laws passed by this Congress. It did not give you that mandate. You act as if your disagreement with the law, or even the public's disagreement with the law, is relevant and gives you the ability to create your own law. It does not give you that ability. Let's start with your spending. You are on track to trigger the Anti-Deficiency Act. That means you are going to spend more money than you have been allocated by Congress. This is a rare occurrence, and it is wildly illegal. Your agency will be broke by July, over 2 months before the end of the fiscal year. You may not think that Congress has provided enough money to ICE, but the Constitution and the federal law does not allow you to spend more money than you have been given or to invent money. And this obsession with spending at the border, as the chairwoman mentioned, has left the country unprotected elsewhere. The security threats to the United States are higher, not lower, than when Trump came to office. To fund the border, you have illegally gutted spending for cybersecurity. As we speak, Russian and Chinese hackers are having a field day attacking our nation. You've withdrawn funds for disaster prevention. Storms are going to kill more people in this country because of your illegal withholding of these funds. Your myopia about the border, fueled by President Trump's prejudice against people who speak a different language, has shattered many of this country's most important defenses. Now let's talk about the impoundments. When Congress appropriates funds for a specific purpose, the administration has no discretion as to whether to spend or not spend that money unless you go through a very specific process with this committee. Let me give you two of many instances of this illegal impoundment. The first is the Shelter and Services Program. Senator Britt may want to zero that account out, but that account is funded, and it was funded in a bipartisan way. You don't like the program. Your policy is to treat migrants badly. I think that's abhorrent, but it doesn't matter that you don't like the program. You cannot cancel spending in this program, and you cannot use the funds as you have to fund other things, like ICE. You have also canceled citizenship and integration grants, which help lawful permanent residents become citizens, helping them take the citizenship test. I know your goal is to try to make life as hard as possible for immigrants, but that goal is not broadly shared by the American public. That's why Congress, in a bipartisan way, for decades, has funded this program to help immigrants in this country become citizens. Now let's talk about why encounters at the southern border are down so much. This is clearly going to be your primary talking point today. You will tell us that it represents a success. But the primary reason why encounters are down is because you are brazenly violating the law every hour of every day. You are refusing to allow people showing up at the southern border to apply for asylum. I acknowledge that you don't believe that people should be able to apply for asylum, but you don't get to choose that. The White House doesn't get to choose that. The law requires you to process people who are showing up at the border and who claim asylum. Why? Because our asylum law is a bipartisan commitment, an effort to correct for our nation's unconscionable decision to deny entry to Jews to this country who were being hunted and killed by the Nazis. Our nation, Republicans and Democrats, decided, wrote it into law, that we would not repeat that horror ever again, and thus we would allow for people who were fleeing terror and torture to come here, arrive at the border, and make a case for asylum. Finally, let's talk about these disappearances. In an autocratic society, people who the regime does not like or people who are protesting the regime, they are just often picked up off the street, spirited away, sometimes to open-ended detention, sometimes they're never seen again. What you are doing, both the individuals who have legal rights to stay here, like Kilmar Abrego Garcia, or students who are just protesting Trump's policies, is immoral. And to follow the theme, it is illegal. You have no right to deport a student visa holder with no due process, simply because they have spoken in a way that offends the president. You can't remove migrants who a court has given humanitarian protection from removal. Now, reports suggest that you are planning to remove immigrants with no due process and send them to prisons in Libya. Libya is in the middle of a civil war. It is subject to a level 4 travel advisory, meaning we tell American citizens never to travel to Libya. We don't have an embassy there because it is not safe for our diplomats. Sending migrants with pending asylum claims into a war zone just because it's cruel is so deeply disturbing. Listen, I understand that my Republican colleagues on this committee don't view the policy the way that I do. My Republican colleagues don't share my level of concern for the way that this administration treats immigrants. That's fine. But what I don't understand is why we don't have consensus in the Senate and on this committee on the decision by this administration to impound the spending that we have decided together to allocate in defense of this nation. We as an appropriations committee, we work interminable hours to write and pass a budget. This budget is really hard to write and pass. And so we make ourselves irrelevant when we allow the administration to ignore what we have decided. And then when we look the other way, when the administration rounds up immigrants who are here illegally and have committed no offenses worthy of detainment, we also do potential irreversible damage to the Constitution. These should not be partisan concerns, destroying the power of Congress, eroding individuals' constitutional rights. This should matter to both parties. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here, and I look forward to your testimony.
Senator Chris Murphy didn't just question the Secretary of Homeland Security, he delivered one of the most forceful warnings we've heard about the direction of DHS and its impact on American democracy. When Murphy opened with the line, "Your department is out of control," he wasn't being theatrical, he was issuing a constitutional alarm bell. Think about what that means. A sitting senator on the Appropriations Committee is telling the cabinet secretary responsible for border security, immigration, disaster prevention, and cyber defense that her department is breaking the law and ignoring Congress. Murphy starts with the budget, and this part is crucial. The federal budget isn't a suggestion, it's the law. Agencies are given a specific amount of money by Congress, and they are legally required to stay within those limits. Murphy accuses DHS of blowing past that limit, potentially violating the Anti-Deficiency Act. For most viewers, that might sound like bureaucratic jargon, but it's actually one of the few bright red lines in government spending. Violating it isn't a slap on the wrist, it's illegal. It's the kind of thing that can get officials investigated or even removed. And Murphy doesn't stop there. He accuses DHS of something called impoundment, refusing to spend money that Congress has already approved. This is where the separation of powers comes into play. Congress controls the purse. The administration can't just decide not to spend money on programs it doesn't like. If DHS is truly doing what Murphy describes, canceling grants for migrant shelters, stopping programs that help legal immigrants become citizens, diverting disaster prevention funds to border operations, that's not just a policy disagreement. That's defiance of the law, and by extension, of Congress's constitutional authority. Now think about the programs he's talking about. shelters that keep families from sleeping on the street, citizenship programs that help immigrants study for their tests, disaster funds that prepare communities for hurricanes and wildfires, cybersecurity efforts that protect us from Russian and Chinese hackers. These aren't abstract line items, they are lifelines. Murphy is making the case that this administration is sacrificing them to pour everything into border enforcement. And here's the deeper layer. He argues that this isn't just about security, it's about ideology. He suggests it's driven by prejudice against people who speak another language or look different, and that this obsession with the border is leaving Americans vulnerable elsewhere. Then he moves to asylum, and this is where Murphy's argument becomes even more powerful. He reminds everyone why asylum law exists in the first place, because during World War II, the U.S. turned away Jewish refugees who were later killed in the Holocaust. After that tragedy, America made a promise: never again. We enshrined that promise into law, guaranteeing that anyone fleeing persecution could at least make their case at our border. Murphy accuses DHS of breaking that promise every single day by refusing to let migrants apply for asylum. This isn't just a policy disagreement, it goes to the heart of American values. Do we keep our word to the world, or do we shut the door on those running from terror? Murphy is telling us that this is about more than numbers or politics. It's about morality and history. And then comes the most chilling part. Murphy compares what DHS is doing to what happens in authoritarian regimes. He talks about people being spirited away, disappearing into detention or deported without due process. He warns about students being deported for protesting, migrants with court protections still being targeted, and even reports of people being sent to war zones like Libya. Think about that. Libya is so unsafe that we don't even keep an embassy there, yet DHS is allegedly planning to send asylum seekers back into that chaos. Murphy's message is as much to his fellow senators as it is to the secretary. If Congress allows the executive branch to keep ignoring the law, then Congress makes itself irrelevant. And if that happens, we all lose, because the Constitution only works when each branch defends its role. This hearing wasn't just about money or border numbers, it was about the rule of law. It was about whether one administration can rewrite immigration rules on its own. It was about whether Congress still has the power it's supposed to have under the Constitution. Here's why this matters to you. When Congress loses its power of the purse, when agencies start deciding which laws to follow and which to ignore, ordinary citizens lose their voice in government. Because Congress represents the people, that's where your voice lives. Murphy is saying, if they let this go, the balance of power tips toward the executive branch in ways that could last far beyond one administration. This is why moments like this hearing matter. Not because they make for a good headline, but because they reveal the tug of war over democracy itself. If you want more people to understand what's really at stake, share this video, like it, and make sure you subscribe to Democrats Arising. Because every week, we break down the hearings, the debates, and the decisions in Washington that shape the future of our democracy. And we do it in a way that helps you cut through the noise and see what's really going on.